Hey guys, it's Key Fashion Bee, and I wanted to share with you a healthy conversation I had with some of my fellow expat friends. I wanted you to get some insight on our perspectives facing racism and discrimination abroad, some of the things we've experienced and may not have experienced. I hope that you can enjoy this video. I will mention that unfortunately, during the taping of this conversation, we faced a serious rain and thunderstorm, which caused some extreme technical difficulties, as you will see. However, I hope you're able to still enjoy the video, and if so, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Currently living in China and have been here for 3 years. I've also lived in Costa Rica in college. So those are my two living abroad experiences. Mike, introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Mike or Mick. I've lived in China for about 1.5 years. I've also lived in Vietnam and Japan. Currently, I'm in Vietnam. I left China last fall. Yeah. Canada.
Who's going next? Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris. I come from Germany. I think the first time I lived abroad for some time was in Britain, like as a schoolboy. And I spent a year in Israel doing civil service because at the time we had this army service. So in order to get away from it, you could do some civil service instead abroad. And I also spent some time in France at university. And now I'm in China, Guangzhou, since 4 years about, and I work here.
Hi guys, I guess I'll go next. My name is Runako Celina. I'm based in Beijing. China is the only foreign country foreign country that I've lived in. And I've been in Beijing for about 7 years. And my native country, the country that I was born in, I prefer, is the UK.
Okay, great. Thank you guys.
Sorry.
Okay, so I'm from Kwaansa, and I'm originally from Ghana, and I've been working in China since like 2019. So I'm in Shandong province, Jinan right now, and I've been teaching English for the past 1 year. So yeah, those are my experiences in China. Not so long, just a year. Over a year, just a little bit over a year.
Have you experienced or witnessed any discrimination or racism while living abroad? If so, what were those experiences like?
Not directly, but I've seen a couple of things. For example, in Japan, my friends and I were looking for a place to drink, and we saw a bar, but on the bar's door, it said that, what did it say? It said no foreigners, and it might have said no Koreans or foreigners. And if it didn't say the latter, then my friend saw one that said that version of, no foreigners allowed or no Koreans or foreigners. The other one was in Beijing. This wasn't me, but my friend, she's mixed black, white, and she was walking down the street. She told me that when she was walking for a friend in, was it Nanjing? Yeah, Nanjing, that somebody across the street basically said, "Hey Ren Hen Cho," which means black person stinky. So those are the two incidences I can remember. There were probably a couple more minor ones, like people not being friendly to me based on being a foreigner. At least that's what I perceived it as. But yeah, those are the two ones that stick out. Oh, and sorry, one more. It was kind of a crazier one in Vietnam. I was walking down the street late at night in a bar district, and I met these two Indian guys, and I was being harassed by a couple of people on motorbikes. And because I was in the bar district, I think it was like a mama-san. Anyway, she was just trying to solicit. I was saying, no, go away, go away, go away. Then the Indians came and also helped me, tried to tell them to go away. But then the people on the motorbike, the girls, the women on the motorbike turned violent against the Indians. And they started saying like, Indian people, stinky Indian people, go home. And they tried to ram the Indian dudes with their scooter. They didn't try to ram me or say anything against me, but they did against the Indian guys. So yeah, those are the three countries, well, some of the three countries I lived in. So in every country, essentially, I've seen something like that.
Oh, wow. So you haven't experienced any firsthand discrimination or racism?
Nothing crazy. There was a couple times in Japan where I was told to go away because they don't take foreigners. These were in receptionists in hotels. Now, as far as I know, it's not like China. I don't think they have restrictions on who they can accept, especially in big cities. This was in Osaka. But yeah, there were some hotels that just didn't want to let me in. Now, it was probably a combination that I was a foreigner and the fact that the hotel might have been in a bad area and I didn't realize, because I always tried to stay in the cheapest accommodation. That sometimes means that you stay in basically red light districts, and I don't always know what district I'm in. So I don't know. I think if anything, I experienced something really relatively minor like that.
Chris, what about you?
I only like first-hand experiences with racial discrimination were only in China and only recently. Like the only unfriendly or unpleasant experience I had because of my German background was limited to like German background, was once in Israel when like someone said, "No, get away, Germans." But that was due to historic reasons, and I think that is completely a different thing. So my only first-hand experience really here, and all very recently, like I'd say like end of March, where like the restaurant like we refused to serve us inside, said we should just get takeaway food, even though the restaurant was full. Like there was still space, but people were sitting inside, and they said, "No, I shouldn't go in there." But there was one thing, but another thing that I found really made me angry was when I wanted to take the metro, and there was in the beginning of April, I wanted to get on the subway in Guangzhou, and they didn't want to let me on the subway. They said I have to register, and they couldn't clearly say what they want me to register. It was a new kind of thing that they wanted foreign-looking people to register. There was no question about neither my nationality nor like the date when I had entered China or whatsoever. And there was also no clear explanation about the registration, and no one else had to register. And then when I was arguing with the security guards, another Chinese guy came, immediately starting to talk to me in English, explaining to me that I, as a foreigner, have to abide by the laws, laws in China, and so on. And that was pretty bad, because now it's something okay. Because earlier, a friend of mine was refused to take the subway, a Tajikistan friend. And when I said, "Oh shit, now this happens to me too," and that happened twice that very day, and then I stopped taking the subway for some time. Now this seems okay again. And then there were some smaller things, like in the supermarket, when we heard a family, "Oh, there's a foreigner," so you make sure, and then like make sure your mask is correct, and then press your mask on your nose and these things. So such a couple of in small shops or so. So my first-hand experiences.
Yeah, I mean, based in Beijing, I definitely have seen, instances of racism or discrimination that have happened. A lot of the time it tends to be kind of less explicit stuff. So the picture taking, the kind of comments sometimes when people don't realize that you speak Mandarin, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think I've been lucky in the sense that I live in a major city and the capital. So that's probably protected me a little bit from some of the incidents that happen elsewhere. But that tends to be the full extent of my own experiences. But obviously, as everyone else has said, I'm aware of other instances and have either witnessed other instances or I've been told of them. So yeah, it tends to be a lot of the time that kind of subtle comment and that kind of thing, as opposed to physical attack in my first-hand experience anyway. What about you?
Yes, I've experienced quite a bit of racism. When I lived in Costa Rica, I didn't experience any racism, partly because most of the locals there, their skin color is the same as mine. So I just fit right in with them. And then I could speak Spanish. So the only time they realized I wasn't a local is when I spoke because of my accent, and they can tell, oh no, she's a foreigner who can speak Spanish. She's definitely not a native speaker. But I've never experienced racism while I lived there. I was treated as if I was one of them, and no, I never experienced it for my first experience living abroad. Now, here in China, oh God, I've experienced quite a bit. So I lived in Beijing for 1 year, and I don't really remember if I had any incidents of discrimination or racism that I can recall. Sometimes I would get like a weird stare, or maybe someone would sneak and take a picture, but firsthand, no. But I do have a lot of friends and associates that told me of stories that they experienced, or the constant taking videos of them, taking pictures of them, wanting to touch their hair. And I'm not sure that would fit for discrimination, racism, and more just of being rude and curiosity and some other things. But I can't think of anything firsthand. Now, here in Guangzhou, absolutely.
Right.
There's been so many different instances, especially now after we've been dealing with COVID. It's gotten a lot worse for me, and particularly because in Guangzhou, it's considered Chocolate City, which is named that because of the heavy African population here. So they associate any person with dark skin as being African until they look at your passport or until they hear you speak and they're like, oh, no, you're American or you're British. And then they might treat you a little differently, unfortunately. But firsthand, I've had people call me a black monster. I've had people say comments on the metro, or they would get up because they don't want to sit beside me, or if I sat down, they would get up or move. I've had people not get on the elevator if I was on there, or they would get off if I was on there. And people, the children, as a matter of fact, someone just did it earlier tonight as we were entering home, that she grabbed her children as if I was some type of dinosaur and I was going to bite their heads off. I'm just like, what am I going to do to your children now? What am I going to do? Like, it's just so ignorant and it's annoying. And it's unfortunate because I was telling Chris earlier that I've kind of become numb to it, which is sad, which means I'm getting used to it. And I shouldn't get used to something like that because it's never okay in any place, in any situation. So, oh, there you are. We can see you now. I've seen job postings in different WeChat groups that will say no Black people. I actually knew a coworker who one time they told her because she put on some makeup to make her face look lighter. They told her that. I was standing right there. She's a little darker than me. And they told her, they asked her, could she put on makeup? Does she have a lighter complexion makeup to put on for a meeting? I was like, wow, you guys have no decorum about yourselves. There's been many instances. It's so many that I can't even. Or even when you want to ask for help for things, sometimes I've experienced a lot of racism and discrimination here in Guangzhou, unfortunately, and it's just worse in the more recent months. Not being allowed in the metro. Today I wasn't allowed to go into the electronic market. And Chris and I and some other friends who are locals, we went to the same exact electronic market yesterday and they let us in with no problem. Today I went by myself to that same exact place and he told me no, I couldn't come in. I'm like, what? And then yesterday, a DD drive.
What did he?
Huh? What'd you say?
Did he give you? Did he tell you why? Did he even try and make it?
No, he just kept shaking his head and his hand saying, no, 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 no. And I tried to show him that I had the health code scan. He didn't even want to look at it. And then yesterday, when I took a DD, he wouldn't stop for me. He slowed down to pull up and I waved my hands at him. And once he saw I was Black, he said no and he drove off. So I did report that to customer service and they did say that they would reprimand him for that and those actions and also give him a low score. So I hope they are true to their word because that's not acceptable. But it's just, I don't know what's worse, experiencing it abroad or experiencing it in my native country. I don't.
Yeah.
Because here it's very direct. It's very direct, more so than in America. You do have some situations where it's direct, but a lot of times it's hidden and you have to kind of wonder, did they do that because, or I don't know. It's been a lot. Okay, we are waiting for you. What have experiences been? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clearly. Now, did you just say that they kind of hide when they are trying to be racist towards you? Then probably my experience is rather different because for me, I think that it is quite blatant. They do it right in front of your face. They are not a little bit coy about it. They're just right. How do I put it? Like a friend told me that in America or in Britain or in white societies where there are Black minorities and all that, at least the government has stipulated laws that protect the rights of Black people. But here in China, it's more or less like it's normal. When someone is racist towards you, it's like they don't see it or they don't even notice it or they don't even know that it's racism. So for me, if you ask me, I'll say that my experience is quite different in the sense that when I first got to China, right from Africa, looking very dark, not like the Obama Black that you guys are normally called. For I have seen you in the video, Tak and the other Black lady. You're a little bit lighter in terms of the blackness, but for me and for a host of friends of mine that came to China from Africa, we look very dark. And then for us, oh man, the the racism was crazy. I don't even know whether to classify it as racism or probably colorism, because when we first got here, you couldn't even sit in a bus, in a subway. You could not go around, travel around freely, because anytime you move into a bus, into a train, into any transport service, you are left alone. Your seat is wide open. Nobody wants to sit close to you. And if you go and sit close to someone, they'll just get up and then probably hold their nose, indicating that you smell or you have a bad odor or something. So when I first got here, it was really a bad situation for me until I later got accustomed to their culture and realized that being too dark for them, even the Chinese, it's a little bit, for them, it's not so good in the sense that if they are yellow, for instance, if some of them have a dark pigment in their yellowish color, they even refer to them as inferior. So for us, it was kind of different. But in all, I've realized that as time moved on, as time went on, when they got to know us, when you learn the language a little bit and you assimilate yourself with them, it kind of tones down a little bit. The racism, the colorism, it's toned down a little bit. So that is my experience so far. I don't know if anyone else has an opinion or something, but for me, it was quite different. When I got here, it was very, very different. It was very difficult for me. And the last thing I want to add was the culture shock. The culture shock that I had. You see people just pulling out their cameras and then taking pictures of you. At that time, I didn't understand the language, and all they will be saying is, "See this black monkey. See this black dude. See, he's laughing. Oh, he's taking a bus. Does he even have a bus in his country?" That kind of thing. So it was very, very funny when I got to understand the language and realize the things they were talking about. So you could go around on WeChat and see your own pictures being circulated in your friends and all that. So those are kind of experiences that I had.
Yeah, it's very direct here. And when I first moved here, I appreciated it being direct because at first I was telling myself, well, I'd rather you just do it and tell me than for me to wonder. I'd rather for you to do it and I know, and so then I can make the choice to separate myself from that situation versus me not knowing and just always wondering if that's the case. But now I've been here for so long, I don't like it either way. I don't like it being direct, and I don't like when it's not direct. I just don't like it at all. So that leads me to my next question, which is, have you some of these same experience in your native country? And if you have or if you haven't, what's the difference? So I've explained the difference between the racism that I've experienced in America versus being abroad is, again, here it's very direct in your face. It's not hidden. In America, my experiences have been, it wasn't direct. No one ever called me the N-word or black anything to my face. No one's never done that to me in America. But working in a corporate environment, there is this tone of racism and discrimination that happens. And it's not said, it's unspoken, but the reason why you didn't get a promotion or the reason why there's this glass ceiling or this cap, why without it being said. And that has been my experience in my home country.
In Canada, I haven't really experienced anything like that too much. I would say I get some looks, or I think that some people are talking about me. Again, I can't tell because I don't speak the language. But for example, when I go to an Arab like shisha bar or shisha lounge or something. But other than that, maybe they're just looking at me because people like me don't often come there. So I don't know. I've grown up in places that are majority white. Even in Canada, I haven't lived in, for example, Toronto. I lived in other smaller cities. So I really have a lack of experience here other than maybe not fitting in a couple of places in town.
What about in Canada? You said you grew up in a predominantly white area. So did you witness any racism that took place from other people in your native country?
That experience was in Canada, and no, I haven't experienced anything unless you maybe include like childhood experiences. Maybe there was an Asian friend I had, or a new student who came, for example, from Sierra Leone. So maybe kids would make comments, like mildly racist comments against the Asian kids, or mildly racist, subliminally racist comments against the new kid from Sierra Leone. But I think that's kid stuff. I haven't witnessed anything as an adult, and actually, I knew these people for a long time after elementary school, and we all got along great afterwards, like in high school and beyond. So yeah, I have a lack of experience in this case.
Okay.
Mhm.
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, as I said, like I didn't have such first-hand experiences in Germany, but like something for us when I was grew up, I was a teenager in the 90s, and I got interested in social and political issues in the 90s. That was after the reunification, and me and my friends, we had like some of um, a bad feeling about what was going on in politics in Germany, because in early after the reunification, there were racist pogroms of in Eastern Germany, where you could tell that the local police, the local firefighters, they did tolerate to a certain degree collective attacks on asylum seekers' houses, for example. And there was like a growing such discourse going on, and there was there were anti-Semitic incidents in my small town. We did organize demonstration against it, and we discovered there was a former chief or boss, how do you call this, like leader of a concentration camp in one of the neighboring small cities. So we made this public, and there was always the experience, like if you dig a bit deeper, if you like challenge people, then they would start talking about like the Jewish conspiracy behind like international media or something. So that was not uncommon. Yeah, and that was something we discussed a lot in response in the 90s. So, but I mean, all this was secondhand. All this was, I was never attacked, but I felt like these are the this is the fascist or anti-Semitic legacy of Nazi Germany, which still like lives on or so. So we felt like we have to demonstrate against it. And then it was only, yeah, I mean, then spent a lot of time, mostly lived in Berlin. I had a little contact to, like, we had a pretty strong refugee movement in already before 2015, where like some friends helped a little bit, and but then I had left for China in 2015 before many more refugees, particularly from through the Mediterranean and from Syria, came to Germany, and this became a much broader movement. I haven't seen it, but because then at that time I was already in China. Yeah, so I like from this I'd say like social movement perspective or so, I had to come across it, and then more was, I think, anti-Semitism, because of the history in Germany.
Yeah, I think in my case, you know, the UK has a history of institutional racism, and so there is this feeling of a limited amount of opportunity based on race, sometimes gender, but in a sense, race. And so I think that is the main difference. That's the kind of thing that exists more in the UK. We do have other instances as well. I mean, I have been verbally abused, especially because I grew up in areas that weren't very diverse. So that has existed as well. But I think the main difference is that racism in the UK tends to be institutional. It tends to involve kind of ideas that certain characteristics are inherent to a race, or perhaps that you are inherently less intelligent, maybe because of your racial background, that kind of thing, and that can lead to like limited opportunities, etc., etc. Even if people don't explicitly state these things, because of the history and because of, you know, the origins of kind of racial pseudoscience being so tightly linked to Europe, that's kind of what you tend to see. Again, even if it's not explicitly stated to you, British culture isn't the most direct, so people won't necessarily say to you, you know, straight up. But you definitely have an awareness of these kind of things in practice, and certain studies have been conducted that suggest that that is an issue. Whereas I don't think, I haven't experienced personally having studied in China. And
how about Christopher?
Yeah, I would
Have you had
largely
racism?
largely agree. I mean, there's one example, but first about your question and then concerning Europe, because I would largely agree with Mike. So Germans have stereotypes about Polish, about Southern Europeans, about Eastern Europeans, a lot bad. And you can probably, it depends, like groups, ages. Typically you would have someone complaining about the Eastern Europeans or the Southern Europeans, the Greeks, to be lazy. But then they have a colleague from one of these countries and say, yeah, but this colleague is cool. The Romanians are thieves, but my Romanian colleague is cool. This is something which is widespread, I think. And or you have descriptions about a crime scene and then something Southern European person or Mediterranean looking or something. And that is typical German conservative racism towards people who, like in the broader picture, would be described as white or Caucasian, but their hair would be darker than like this Aryan or like Northern European hair color. So there's this kind of Northern European, Southern European kind of stereotype and racism. And then, I mean, some of it is really ugly. It gets towards Sinti and Roma, the so-called gypsy people. It's North, including violence. And I mean, the other thing I said already was mentioned earlier, like anti-Semitism is based on the concept of races that have social attributes, and it wasn't just nasty, it was meant to, it was planned to destroy, to annihilate. So yes, we have this. The one thing I experienced was like really marginal, but still made me feel uncomfortable, and I felt like or made me realize I lack the understanding of such things. A bunch of Australians made jokes about Germans not understanding humor, which can be disputed. I mean, there's something true about it, but it kind of came something. I don't know. I didn't really realize that this being in this bubble of this made me, how should I describe it? Like believe their stereotypes. And it took me a while to understand, well, it's actually, they had some stupid stereotypes which can be used to make fun, but which I don't have to, they don't have nothing to do with me. But it took me a while to understand
Oh,
this. But that's very
okay.
minor.
So it's more or less like stereotypes rather than it's more or less like stereotypes rather than pure racism like other people of color face across the world, right? It's more or less like stereotypes rather than racism, discrimination, prejudices, like
Uh,
the colored races. Or
I
if I
mean, I mean
understand,
the it changed. I mean, when you look at anti-Semitism, um, then we all know how brutal this was. Um, so, but it has changed. Like for Germany, it changed a lot since immigration has become so important for the German economy. So Germans became more friendly towards foreigners, which they haven't been for a long time.
Do you feel safe?
I think we're
yeah,
speaking
should I
about.
go? Can
in
I go?
Asia.
Can I go?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, now
Anywhere that
in
you
terms
live
of
abroad.
yeah, let's talk about China first because that is my first point of meeting other people not from my own area or from my own country. I realize that it's a little bit safe in terms of you moving out, going about going to teach or going outside to hang out with other people and all that. But when it becomes a little bit unsafe is especially when you have a Chinese lady as a girlfriend, not even someone that you are really into in terms of relationship, but just a platonic relationship where you just hang out or talk about yourselves. You realize that the Chinese are very, very, very jealous, especially for the white my white folks over here. Talk about being safe in China. First of all, I'll say that if you are minding your own business, if you are doing things that nobody cares about, if you are going about your daily business, if you have the right visa, if you're on the right work visa or whatever, life is very safe. But the moment it becomes unsafe is when you have friendships with Chinese friends, particularly ladies, or when you enter into certain affairs, which is uh, political, and it goes against the Chinese Communist Party. Those are the things that are a little bit of a gray area that I think it will make China very unsafe for you. And the least I want to add is maybe probably a friend of mine was just caught for smoking weed. And I think those are one of the few things that if you are doing, that China becomes unsafe. But aside that, I think China is very safe. I haven't been anywhere that people have attacked me, just like in Africa, where someone will put a gun at your head and say, give me your money or give me your wallet or something like that. But in totality, China is very safe. But it becomes unsafe for you when you go about dating their girls and then doing all sort of things which will go against the Chinese Communist Party. So that is what I'll say for now.
Do you feel safe in your home country? So you feel
In my
safer
home
in China?
country, um, I'll say that in my country, because I know my country, like that was where I was born and bred. So definitely, I'll be able to find my way around things. So I'll be safer in my own country. And even if I get into trouble, I know how to get out of it. But in China, I'll say that if you don't get into any altercation with certain Chinese people, you might feel it's very safe. You might think China is one of the safest places you've ever been to. But the moment you have an altercation, you have conflict with Chinese people, then they all gang up on you as if like they are termites going for one bread or something in the middle of a fall of summer or something. So it becomes
Yep.
very difficult and a touchy topic to talk about when you are free, like you are fresh off the boat and you are in China, you feel it's very safe. The moment you get into contact with Chinese people, have conflict with them, then you realize China is very unsafe. Because for me, I live in a secluded area where it seems I'm one or two, just two foreigners in that whole community. and everybody in the community knows us, know where we live, because they know our numbers on our apartment numbers. So it is very easy for them to identify you. You might see someone on the road, you've never seen him before, know nothing of him, and he will show you pictures of your own self. He will ask you, "Oh, don't you live in this community? Oh, don't you live in that building?" I'm like, "How did you get to know me?" So when you get into conflict, problems with Chinese, they are easy. You are easy to find. You are easy to target. And like I've seen so many people killed. I've seen so many people, a lot of things. Like I don't know how to express it, but a lot goes on in China. But if you are free, if you go about your daily business and come back home, you will feel China is very safe. So that is my point for now.
So you feel that the safety is based off of your lifestyle choices. So if you choose to just come, go to work, your business, go home, and keep a very straight and narrow path, you're very safe. But if you
Very
choose
safe.
socialize in certain circles and socialize with certain people and kind of have a little bit more freedom.
When you start going to clubs, when you start moving out with Chinese people, going to the KKTVs, where the open places where a lot of Chinese people hang around, man, if you don't take care, you get into trouble. And there you realize that China is very unsafe for you. They will make things very complicated for you if you don't, battle it up and then try to be a bit reserved. Not trying to get into any physical contact or any physical sort of action or something. But aside that, if you go about your daily business, you go to work, you just come back, you pick up your phone, you call the people that are around you and all that, China is very safe. You have no problem with anybody else. But when you start clubbing, when you start moving out with people, that is when you realize the bad side of China, the bad side of the society, the primitive mindset of certain people in China. You'll face it. I don't know if anybody else has experienced it. I've experienced a lot here. I don't know about you guys. Like, if anyone has experienced something like that, you could share or something.
So your opinion is to just surround yourself with
The right
other
people.
versus interacting with locals. You can put yourself at jeopardy of being in unsafe situations.
Interacting with local people, I think I'll need to
It's not
explain that a little bit. In the sense that
friending to a
just
certain extent.
if it's just friendly vibes, no problem. But when it gets into issues where it's a little bit personal, you have girlfriends. I want to stress on that. If you have a Chinese girlfriend, be careful, especially when he's beautiful. That's it. that is
What if it's a
the
male?
Achilles heel of people.
What if you have male Chinese, male to male? Is there any problems? Does that make you feel unsafe?
Male to male. There's no problem. If it's the opposite sex, that is where the problems comes from. If it's the relationship with the opposite sex, yeah. Okay, so that's that.
When I was living in Jerusalem in 2001, 2002, I was afraid of bombings. That was the time of the second Intifada, and so like every week we could see new bombings that happened. I was a bit afraid, but I mean, this is not something you were like particularly as a foreigner afraid of, or so that would hit anybody. I was never really afraid in China, except at the beginning of the epidemic. I was afraid, and I'd hardly ever been so afraid in my life, I guess, because I didn't know what was going on. I felt I can't rely on anything. People suddenly start taking my temperature, and I don't know are they going to turn on me? If is there something if I catch a cold, and if they consider me contagious, will they just put me in a hospital and I get infected in a hospital because it's such a chaos. So at that time I was afraid. In the end of January, I think. A part of that, I have the same feeling as like I'm not afraid of any kind of street violence or mocking or so. Like a place where I feel I have to be very, very cautious is at work, things I say or things I criticize. And I've become like I would say overly cautious, watching my word. I would never show any kind of emotion towards anybody at work, even though I get pissed off or so. Always try to be like extra cool because I have no idea and no control over what other people at work would make up or would spread rumors or whatever about me when I say something which they don't like or so. Yeah, but that's not feeling unsafe or so. Yeah.
I guess everyone's experience is different, and my main experience has been in China. And overwhelmingly, I would say yes, if I'm honest. I think I would definitely agree with, the brother who just said about if you are to get into conflict with locals, then I think that would be a bit different because the country is always going to side with local people in the majority of cases in any kind of instance. But if, again, you don't end up in those situations, and I have been lucky enough not to, I think overwhelmingly it's been a very safe. Well, I just remember being so. Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to say that as a woman, I think growing up in London, one thing that I always was made aware of was just personal safety and security, walking, especially late at night and things like that. And that has never been something. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be careful anywhere that you go, or that there aren't risks in any country, including China, but I just never felt in danger in that sense. And yeah, so overwhelmingly, I'd say it is a safe experience. I would be interested to see how post COVID-19, if anything does change, particularly with the suspicion and the kind of attitude towards foreign-looking people. So yeah, I think things will change, but I definitely am also aware that, experiences can vary, and particularly in the Black community, my experience isn't necessarily representative of everyone. And I also think that there are instances where, like Black men in particular, stand to have worse experiences in some cases in terms of safety and security in some Chinese cities. So yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag, but again, personally, I've definitely felt safe in China. And also the majority of my experience has been, now I live off campus, now I've graduated from my work, but I was a student at first, and I think that also changes things because you're living in a student bubble, essentially. You're living on campus, you're living the kind of Chinese people that you're going to engage with as well, people who are engaged in further or higher education. So the experience is probably a bit different than just living on the outside. Yeah, that's my take.
Would you say you feel safer when you were in China versus your home country, or it just varies?
I think that the concerns around safety are different. So in China, kind of similar to what someone else has said, I think I'd be more concerned about if something happened and I needed to seek legal advice or legal help, I would feel disadvantaged. And that's a feeling of insecurity and safety in a sense, because I'd feel as though I'd stand at less of a chance of being treated fairly because it's not my country. because I'm not Chinese looking and I'm not Chinese by nationality. So that's a feeling of safety that I wouldn't say that I have in the UK. Like, I'm, besides perhaps some worries about how police treat Black people in the UK, I'd say that in terms of being treated fairly, that wouldn't be a concern. But then there are other concerns. Like I said, like as a woman walking home late at night, I would be on my P's and Q's. Like, I would be more worried than I would be in China. Terrorism, you know, there are issues in terms of violence and personal safety in that sense that exist in the UK that do exist in China. But again, it's not something that immediately comes to mind as a concern. So it's like a different type of safety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I actually felt in past tense pretty safe in China for the most part.
Yeah.
It's like I never felt threatened. I can walk down a dark alley in China in the middle of the night and I would not feel scared at all. It can be a man walking behind me down a dark alley while I'm by myself and I still don't feel threatened, scared. No senses are heightened. Which in America, there's no way you would catch me out at a certain time of night. You would never catch me down a dark alley by myself or with anyone. And especially if some man is behind me, I would definitely feel threatened. So when comparing the two, there's a big difference. Where my safety is questioned here is as far as at any given time, policies and things can be enforced here, and we have no rights as foreigners. And that is the part that scares me, and that is the part when I feel unsafe, because we can wake up tomorrow and something can be enforced that can affect us directly, and there's no one that can help us. We would just have to deal with it and hope that some higher force would intervene. And that's when I don't feel safe here. Of course, there's violence. There's other things that make me feel unsafe in America. But here, that uncertainty of, oh my God, what's going to happen today? What's going to happen tomorrow? That is where I feel unsafe. But I don't feel unsafe as far as anything as with crime or violence. I don't feel like I'm going to get robbed. I don't feel like I'm going to be murdered. Any of that aspect of safety, as far as crime related, I feel very safe when it comes to being here. It's the other aspect of it, which is I have no rights. I have no rights here. And I live in a country where the laws and the government is a different type of government than my native country. And so with that being said, me deciding to live here, I do have to be aware of that. But in that same breath, that doesn't mean that we should have to walk around in fear, not knowing what could possibly happen to us. And that should be a universal thing. That shouldn't matter what country you're in. And so that's where I feel unsafe. And given the recent, I guess we can call it an incident, which just happened the last few months. I don't know. I was just talking to Chris the other night. I don't know what word to properly use to call what happened recently. After those events happened, I definitely no longer feel safe as far as what can be done to me and how I can be treated. And I have no voice. I have no rights. I'm just a victim to it. And there's nothing I can do other than leave. That's it. Whereas in America, I would have some rights. I would have advocates that I can go to. I would have places that would give me the help I would need to get me out of a certain situation, which I wouldn't necessarily have that abroad. When I lived in Costa Rica, I did feel safe to a certain extent. I wouldn't walk down a dark alley there either. And the only crime that was major to my awareness was a pickpocketing and things like that. But yeah, that's where I stand as far as the safety. And I do agree, the dating scene, I have seen things myself when a local dates a foreigner, especially if it's not a white foreigner. There are issues that happen with that. There are things that are said, and a lot of people don't like that at all. Especially if the relationship progresses to where they have children involved. That seems to ruffle a lot of feathers. A lot. I've witnessed that myself. And I do think that when you have incidents with locals, you really are a threat. I've felt unsafe. I've had an incident with my previous landlord, and I felt scared in that moment. Even situations when I've been in a taxi or a DD and they want to get over on you, and you can't really even sit there and argue because I'm scared if he calls the police, they're just going to take his side, and I'm just, going to be in trouble. So yes, I agree when it comes to any type of interaction or a negative interaction with locals or even the dating scene, that warrants some safety issues, or that invites some trouble. What about traveling? When you travel to other places that you've traveled to, not necessarily live, but just through traveling, your traveling experiences, have you experienced feeling unsafe, any racism, any discrimination? If you haven't experienced it firsthand, have you witnessed any of that just through your travels around the world?
Once I was in traveling in Jordan, and then the taxi driver wanted to trick us and steal our luggage, but we realized it just in time, and then actually I understood, well, if that's the biggest risk, that the taxi driver tries to trick me and then drive away with my luggage, then I don't really have to be afraid. I just have to be awake. I think when I was in Johannesburg, and I was a bit, I didn't get it how to move around in the city. I didn't, yeah, that was pretty unclear. I was stayed there only for 2 days, and then like my attempt to discover a bit the city didn't go very far because I didn't really got around like using public transportation or so. And then the other day I just spent in a bar with some people I got to know there, and what else? I think mostly fine, yeah. Usually when I travel, I like to walk around, and I don't hang out so much in like sightseeing places or at the beach. I usually like to walk around in the more working class areas and see, or try to get a glimpse of how people live in other places. But normally I don't really feel unsafe, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially in Europe, that's been the main extent. I mean, my family are from the Caribbean, and also have family members in West Africa, and in those I haven't felt discriminated against or unsafe. But in Europe, I wouldn't say, can't remember any instances of feeling unsafe, but I do remember being discriminated against. And again, it's just the typical things of words being said, maybe even like actions being made and things like that. Been called the M word before, I think that was in France actually. But things like that, yeah. But to be fair, I'd say again, the majority of my time abroad has been in China, and it's been lived experience as opposed to just traveling through. Although traveling through different places in China as well has been an experience. So I'd say more it's been elements of racism. I'd be curious to see, when I do travel to other places, how that, but it's mostly been things like that, really. And I'd probably say going through, because China's so huge that your experience in one city could differ completely to your experience in the next, particularly if you go to more rural areas and countryside areas and places where people haven't traveled that much. So there definitely are differences there. There's a lot more curiosity and a lot more, I guess, interest in you as a visibly different person. And I definitely experienced that as well. But again, that's not exactly as strong as racism. It's just more curiosity. And interestingly, in the places that have less foreigners, in my experience, I faced more curiosity, less racism. Whereas in the bigger cities like Beijing, for example, there's been more of that element of discrimination than in the smaller places. So it's definitely a mixed bag of experiences.
That concludes part 1 of our conversation. And as you can see, we are all from different countries with the one commonality of living in China. Stay tuned for part 2 when we share some of our travel experiences. Until next time, toodles!